And at some point we realized our students had about 1/10 the divorce rate of the United States, based upon what basically about a 5% divorce rate instead of about a 50% divorce rate.
Wow.
And we thought there must be wisdom here that we can share broadly. And that's a long way to get you to the answer. That brought us to writing a book about marriage based upon the work that we've been doing.
Oh, that's beautiful. So from 50% to 5%. Okay, I can't wait to hear more about that. All right, that's huge.
We thought it was a good number. Yeah.
I thought so. I think so too. Hey there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. Listen, I have a new success interview for you. It was my privilege to interview Todd Jacobs and Peter Lynn.
My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. TJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com.
You see, Todd and Peter have just written a new book titled It's Not a Partnership. And what this means is marriage is not a partnership. And let me tell you something, in this interview and in the book, of course, we talk about the history of marriage, we talk about the power of marriage, and we talk about how to make a marriage sustain over time. What are some secret principles and ideas that you can apply that will make all the difference, not only in your marriage, but also in your own happiness? And we talk about that quite a bit as well. So listen, no matter where you're at on that spectrum of a marriage relationship, there are definitely tools in here that can help you achieve your ultimate goals. All right, now before we jump into it, I just want to remind you, do me a favor. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, hey, don't forget to subscribe and make sure you click that notification bell so that you're the first to be notified when I come out with a new success interview like this or motivational message. And also, if you're listening to this because you downloaded it off of iTunes or one of the other podcast platforms, hey, thanks for being a part of my community. And if you're not a part of my community, make sure that you subscribe. I would love to have you a part of my community. All right, without any further ado, let's jump right into this interview. Todd, Peter, welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Great to be here.
Yeah,
Great to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. I have to tell a little story that takes us back a few years. You know, Peter, a number of years ago, Peter, I don't remember how many years ago it was, but I've owned GreatnessWithin.com for 20 years now, and it's paid out for several more decades. But early on, you reached out to me out of respect and asked, you said, listen, I bought the URL greatnesswithinseminars.com. Do you have any qualms with me building a business out of that or something like that? I'm right.
Right.
And what was my response?
Your response was, my pleasure. And I believe what you said was, I think you just appreciated me reaching out to you more than anything else.
It's true. I thought, Peter, that was so classy that because I didn't own it, the URL, you could have ran with it and not asked anything. And I just thought that was a classy thing. And so when I saw that you guys, both of you, were coming out with a new book, It's Not a Partnership, I thought, listen, I've got to have these two gentlemen on the call. I'm excited about the conversation. I believe in the value of marriage and how to make a marriage work. Just so you guys know, I've been married 23 years, and
congratulations.
Totally, and I am in love. I will say that the first year of my marriage was painful. Part of that was driven because of, and she shared it before, so it's birth control was jerking with her emotions and hormones and so forth. And that first year, once we realized that and we got off it, let me tell you something. We found out we were pregnant with our oldest son, and that son, Bryce, I've never shared this before. With all of our children, have all been blessings, but that son, Bryce, at that time in our lives, saved our marriage.
And I think it'll touch on some points that you two will share in this interview today, because I think I'll see some parallels when I look at the first month of my marriage and, let's say, 6 or 7 months into my marriage, and then henceforth. So, okay, enough about me.
Great.
Let's get
Amazing.
into it. No, would you each, Todd, why don't you start? Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Great.
Sure. So my name is Todd Jacobs, and I have a strange background which brings me sort of circuitously over many, many decades to writing a book on marriage here with Peter. My own background spans investigative journalism. Before that, screenwriting. I was basically a journalist, investigative journalist, and a filmmaker making documentary films. In an attempt to make an actual real living at some point, I tried to take those skills to Wall Street, where I became a Wall Street analyst over a period of years, and wound up covering for some very large investment banks. I worked for J.P. Morgan as a managing director, and I worked before that for a company called Sanford Bernstein. And my job was basically to try and disentangle very, very complex industries so that people could understand them and then invest in them. And at some point, my interest became much less about making money and trying to help other people understand complex areas of finance, and much more about trying to figure out complex areas of life that could help people, I suppose, live more meaningful lives if they just understood the complexity that they were entering into. At a certain point, sort of a midlife crisis, or maybe the opposite, but a midlife, rebirth, my wife and I decided we were going to move our family to Israel. We would open up a small institution where we would take best and brightest young people in, and kind of using traditional Jewish sources as our backdrop, teach them philosophy, leadership, character development, and in the end, also quite a bit of focus on relationships. This is where I met my partner to be, Peter. Peter and I. Peter was one of the very first hires into this little institute in Jerusalem, and we've been working together with these students for, I guess, now ending up our 15th year. And at some point we realized our students had about 1/10 the divorce rate of the United States, based upon what basically about a 5% divorce rate instead of about a 50% divorce rate.
Wow.
And we thought there must be wisdom here that we can share broadly. And that's a long way to get you to the answer. That brought us to writing a book about marriage based upon the work that we've been doing.
Oh, that's beautiful. So from 50% to 5%. Okay, I can't wait to hear more about that. All right, that's huge.
We thought it was a good number. Yeah.
I thought so. I think so too. Okay, Peter.
Okay. My basic background is that I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and pursuing a degree in architecture, and at the same time enjoying the world of sports a bit too much, and thinking about maybe a professional career in that direction. And as I got more into the field of architecture, I realized that instead of building your kitchen, I wanted to focus on building people, and that kind of led me down a path of where I kind of took a small turn in the construction world and started really investing my time and energy into building people. That led me to Israel. And then professionally over the years, besides being the dean of students in our institution, that led me to pursue a degree in positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, and more recently a doctorate in the field of organizational psychology. So really kind of my main kind of mantra over the years has really been trying to give people the tools they need so they can have the life that they want.
Love it. Love it. Greatness within, right? So
you got it.
So,
and I've been watching your videos for years. That's my bio.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. So interesting. Peter, I did have one more question. Let's jump in the book, but one more question. When you did your studies at the University of Pennsylvania, did you study under Martin Seligman?
Sure.
Seligman?
I'm still in touch with him. It's his program there, and he taught in our program, and a lot of also other big people like Angela Duckworth,
who
wrote the book Grit. A lot of names, Adam Grant. These are teachers in the program, and But Marty Seligman is basically the founder of the program, and he was there teaching us, and I'm still in touch with him.
That's really great. Wow, he's come out with some
Yeah.
powerful stuff too. So I just thought that was interesting. Okay, let's jump into it. Explain the book, the premise of the book. It's not a partnership. All right, here we go.
Maybe I'll jump in. So especially then we always get attacked on this name. What do you mean not a partnership? I thought marriage is exactly a partnership. I thought it's the partnership. Like, what do you mean marriage? What do you mean it's not a partnership? Why title a book with such a strange title? It actually comes out of a true story where I was in New York City visiting one of my students, and we were having coffee at a cafe in New York on the Upper West Side, and he was kind of describing to me, he was in about, I think, the second year of his marriage. They were struggling a bit in their marriage, and he is a super duper wonderful, amazing guy, and his wife, wonderful, wonderful lady, and they were still having problems. They just seemed to not be able to get on the same page, and they were getting a little bit resentful of each other, and they felt like they, what happened to that spark and that love, and he was kind of describing to me some issues that he had. And I said to him, listen, I have to tell you something. I think you're working with the wrong paradigm altogether in your marriage. He said, what do you mean? I said, listen, marriage is not a partnership. I said, you're treating it like a partnership. And he was sort of dumbfounded. And he said, what do you mean it's not a partnership? Of course it's a partnership. But what do you mean? I said, no. Let me, by the way, spoiler alert is that when it's done properly, it really is a partnership. Okay, it's the ultimate partnership. But let's talk about why it usually breaks apart on the partnership basis. In the world of partnerships, if you look into the world of business, like let's take it out of marriage for a moment, most partnerships in the business world fail. And if you look into the statistics on why they fail, it's not why you would think. You would think it'd be because poor business plan, not enough financing, marketing plan doesn't work, the product isn't great. That's not really why most partnerships fail. Most partnerships fail because the attitude of each partner is, I have my rights and my responsibilities. You have your rights and your responsibilities. I always view myself as though I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I always look at you with suspicion and resentment because I never feel like you're pulling your weight. So I spend a lot of my time as a partner judging you, getting angry at you, instead of looking at myself and making sure that my performance is tip top. And when you take that attitude into marriage, so rather than looking at marriages, how can I make you happy? How can I build you? How can I give you the life that you want and deserve? And how can I help, in every way that I can give to you and enable you to do that? Instead, I look at it as, well, 1 second, I did this for you. How come you didn't do that for me? Why did I do this for you? You didn't say thank you. How come I did this 3 times and you only did that 2 times? And that attitude will just, the moment that attitude begins, the happiness is already departed. Even before that. And so we just found that attitude had to be scratched out at the outset. And I remember the student saying to me, you have to write a book and call it Marriage is Not a Partnership. So we shortened that to Not a Partnership, but that's the inception of that title.
Love it. Okay, so let's get into it. I read a couple things. Let's see, where do we start? We got some myths that I printed out. Give us the basic introduction of it, because you get into some history that starts with Adam and Eve, and maybe if you're okay talking about that, I think that sets up a good premise for where we go.
Okay, great. Just also to realize what we tried to bring together in this book are 2 worlds of thought that we thought worked beautifully together. One is ancient mystical wisdom, right, which happens to come from traditional classic Jewish sources, right, which has, we think, sort of self-evident wisdom in it that everybody can relate to, no matter what religion, no matter what sex, no matter what proclivity, everybody can see wisdom as wisdom. And we tried to marry that up with what Peter was describing, was his immersion in modern positive psychology research. And we felt that those 2 things could really come together beautifully and give a bigger picture. So I'll give you just one example of, a starting point and how to think about marriage from classical mystical sources. If you read the story of Adam and Eve, it's a really strange story when you dig into it, because it rings better in the original Hebrew a little bit than it does in translation. But in the original Hebrew, it's very, very clear that the original human being that was created, called Adam. Adam is not a man's name. Adam in Hebrew simply means human being.
Okay.
And the original Adam, it's very clear if you look at the language, was a person who was both male and female together, bonded at the back with two faces, the ability to reproduce, meaning enough equipment to somehow reproduce, all as one intertwined unit, which was both male and female. And then what's very strange is for some reason, the Almighty decides, I'm going to basically tease them apart. I'm going to pull them apart and turn them into two people. Now that that's the story, how he puts Adam to sleep, and then he pulls Eve out of Adam. She's built from Adam. Now you have two individuals who then get a commandment that they should come together, find each other, and become one flesh again.
Right.
Okay, so now then their job is to come and become one flesh. So the question is, I don't get it. Were they always supposed to be two? So why were they created as one? And if the ultimate desire is that they should come back to being one again, well, why did you pull them apart into two? Like the whole thing, like why all these steps?
Right.
So one of the deepest insightful answers is that they were created as one so that it would ring inside of the soul of each of them, that they really are only by themselves part of a greater whole that they need to complete. How do they complete them? How do they complete that? How do they become the whole person again? To find that other that was once part of them. Now, why is it therefore that we need to be two? Because if you're born as one, you never really have a chance to choose each other freely, to come together, to sacrifice for each other, and to give to each other. And it's that longing for the oneness which gives us the spark and the interest to look for our so-called other half. Even popular culture says, your other half or your better half. That expression exists.
Right.
And the concept is, because it rings in a person, there's always a feeling that I can be something bigger and part of something more whole than myself by coming together with the other. But it's only by freely choosing and by giving to the other and becoming one through that giving. That's how we recreate it as human beings with free will, as opposed to having just been born with it and not having to have made those choices.
Mm. Are we all inherently have this desire to be one with another person?
I listen.
Or to bring oneness?
If you look in research that we've seen, it sounds as though most people grow up with a longing for a deep relationship. Now, how society affects that, how their parenting that they received affects that, how their experiences affect that. Obviously, we're not saying that there's something wrong with somebody if they don't have a deep longing to have that relationship. For sure. But it seems to be a part of human nature that people are longing for a oneness, and that oneness is at least believed to be found by coming together with another person who is, in a sense, that soulmate. And what we're really saying is that person really is your soulmate, or can be your soulmate. And you can come together and recreate that amazing oneness, but by making choices and by giving and by working towards it. And so it seems to be a relatively universal thing that the relationship can be the way to find that.
I've heard the word giving now many times.
Several times.
And I will tell you, I know that that's a true principle. If you want more of something, give it away first. If you wait for them to give it to you, listen, it's not going to, it just makes it more difficult. Now, when I was reading this portion, going back to Adam, it says in your book, the word, and I'm not sure that I'm saying it right. This is a Hebrew word, so help me out here. Ezer Kenegda?
Ezer Kenegda, right. That's that word that gets translated into the King James as that she was created as his, and the English word is help meet, HELP MEET. Now, I don't know about you. I haven't got the slightest idea what a help meet is. I don't know. What
I'm with you. I'm with you.
I never understood it growing up, and I still don't know what it means. But in Hebrew, it's an incredible contraction of two words. Ezer means help, and kenegdo means against.
Yeah, I found this
So
interesting right here.
it's an amazing concept that a spouse represents to a person someone who, on the one hand, can help bring you to your wholeness and your completeness and bring you everything and help you in every endeavor and help you in every possible way. But that part of the way that's done is by coming, in a sense, against you, so that you have to work against each, you have to grind against each other a little bit and overcome your differences and overcome the things that separate you. And that is how the two of you can pull together into something bigger. And by the way, if you don't try to do the help piece, all you're left with is the against piece. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, that's why we keep coming back to giving, because giving is that thing that makes us try to kind of grind it out, in a sense. Now, I don't mean that's not supposed to have a negative connotation. It just means we're different people. We have to come together. We have to make space for each other. We have to learn to deal. We have to learn each other's ways of thinking and our sensitivities. And that's how we come together, is that difference comes through, that the helping and the difference come together, in a sense, to create that completeness. If I don't try and do the help, all I have is against. If I have the against, that's it. And there's no, it's one of those things where you can either come together perfectly and beautifully, or it tends to be that you will be at odds with each other. And it's a choice.
Yeah, well, it is a choice. And I would even go a level deeper. It's a choice in conscience, conscience, right? That inner north compass. That right. Anyway, we don't need to go there. But here's what I'll say. When I mentioned to you in the opening of this that the first several months of my marriage was difficult, I can say, if my wife was here right now, she would say, yes, I'm sure my hormones were being messed with because of the chemicals I was putting in my body. But she would also point at me, so I'm being totally authentic here, and she'd say, TJ, you were stubborn too. The truth is, I contributed. And so I've always said to my friends, just in passing, I'm a better person because I'm married. And by the way, she doesn't always agree with me. She makes me work through the thought process, and I'll tell you specifically how. I'm more of a conceptual guy. I can see the big picture. Well, Danielle, in all her beauty, is more of a tactical person. She's more of a strategic person. She's someone that says, are you sure about that? Did you think it all the way through? But then in the end, she does support me, right? But she makes me, she frustrates me because she makes me answer those questions. But I look at that, and after so many years of being married, I've seen that as a strength, not a weakness to want to run away from.
Beautiful.
Unbelievable.
Peter, any thoughts from you?
I mean, I'll tell you that, you keep going back to the world of giving. And I guess I want to just hone on this point here.
Yes.
One of the reasons why we wrote this book, because people asked us, why do you need another book on marriage? It's strange. So I want to kind of put together, especially this first part of the conversation, what we tried to do here was we tried to make a marriage book, which is basically a prerequisite to all the other marriage books out there, meaning all the other marriage books out there are great. They are awesome. I have them on my shelf. I give them out to my students. I've read them. They've been helpful, you name it. But what we try and do more than anything else is, sorry about this.
No, you're good. You're good.
Let me just.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Let me come back to you. Okay.
The last thing you said is what I tried to do. So here, let me fix that.
So, okay. So what we tried to do here in our book was do something which we haven't seen done before. And we really tried to deal with two fundamental questions. Number one, what is this thing called marriage that we yearn for? Meaning, let's define what this thing is called marriage. Meaning, you can't really work on something, you can't invest in it if you're not really sure what this whole thing is. So what we come to do is answer that question, which is a bit of what you and Ty just spoke about. The second thing we do is this thing called marriage comes with a PDF of how to make it work. Everything we have in our life comes with some sort of manual of how to make it work at full capacity. And so is the world of marriage. And that basically, the ultimate recipe about what all of marriage is built on, the PDF manual, is the world of giving. And what we do in our book is describe not only why giving is the meat and potatoes of how a marriage actually works and grows, but then we launch into practical ways of how giving can come alive in your marriage. So you keep coming back to the world of giving. It is at the heart of our book, and it's at the heart of every marriage if you want to get your marriage to that deeper place.
Love it. As I was reading the book, I love what you two wrote right here. The more life centers around me, the more innately selfish and emotionally sterile I become, the more alone I truly am, even when I am surrounded by people. Loneliness gives way to selfishness and taking. That's what the Almighty alluded to just before he created Eve with the deceptively simple declaration, it's not good that human be alone. Why is alone not good? If the total human is fully there, why change things? The human as a single being was missing something absolutely vital to his humanity. What was missing? Giving. I have to think that in all my relationships, if I will turn away, and I've seen this in my seminars too, right? And I teach it. If you take, focused on the self, right? How can I be gratified through this? Instead of how can I serve? How can I give? And in return, I'll get in return. And I think there's a balance there. I mean, just to keep it totally real, I know some people, as I coach leadership and executives from companies, I use an assessment that can track all 172 different traits that people have. Every human being has these 172 traits. Well, there ends up through the Harrison polling, right? There ends up, and it's a really comprehensive, assessment. But it ends up with 12 paradoxes. And one of those paradoxes is one that consists of two traits. So there's 12 paradoxes. Each one consists of two traits. And they can pull against each other if you're not careful. So someone once said, any virtue taken to the extreme can become a vice. And so what you see in this, and people score on this, they don't know that they're scoring on this, but we show them, is that you have one trait called helpfulness, which is I want to serve, I want to give, I want to pour into other people as a leader, for example. And then there's another trait called assertive, and the definition for assertive is that you consider your own needs and wants as you're doing it. And what it shows is, and I find this with very good servant leaders, is that their help is a 10, and maybe they're assertive based on that definition. Their assertive is only a 3. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is that to be effective, we teach where you really want to put people is up in this box up here, which is called mutual help. So what I tell leaders is continue to keep your helpfulness at a 10. Don't change that. In a leadership role, for example, this is a little bit different than marriage, but in a leadership role, expect people to do their part that supports the greater whole, that supports the greater cause. And so I could see where maybe some people will go, well, I'm way helpful, and I'm not, my needs aren't getting met. So are there any thoughts around that paradox, if you will?
Todd, you want to take that?
I mean, I think that when it comes to giving, there's a big mistake that sometimes people make, and I think this will play into exactly what you're saying,
okay,
TJ, which is that giving does not make me a martyr. Giving is not meant to be just a one-way street, and it's like, I don't know, don't bother, I'll sit in the dark, who needs the light bulb? Giving is meant to be a way to become bigger. Giving is, in a sense, taking a certain responsibility. The more responsibility we take, the more we put on our shoulders. But the more you put on your shoulders, the bigger your stature becomes. And by becoming bigger, you not only can discover yourself and your own greatness, but the ability to give that over to another and to invest in the other actually creates love for the other. And it also creates that virtuous cycle that you were talking about, which, it's not just a one-way street. As long as the other person is not a highly dysfunctional person, which sometimes they are, right? When they see that you want their good and you want their well-being and you're willing to invest in them, a normal, healthy person will begin trying to reciprocate and investing in you. So the truth is, it's not meant to be a cynical game where, hey, I'm going to give to you because I know you're going to give back to me. But it happens to be, I'm an investor. What an investor loves is I put in 1 and I get back 2. And the world of giving works that way. If I give to my spouse in a wholesome, meaningful way, because she realizes I'm concerned about her well-being, what tends to happen is she responds in spades in the way that she gives back to me. And she becomes a bigger person in that process. And the two of us not only become bigger, but we get drawn together in more closeness. And so really my needs do get met, but they get met in a very wholesome, beautiful way. And Peter has been a part of some amazing research on giving in terms of how happiness comes out of giving. Peter, I mean, it's worth, if you have a minute for Peter to talk about that.
So we were speaking about Marty Seligman at the beginning of this, our call together. And he says something amazing in his book Flourish. He says that there's something called positive interventions, which are things you can do in your life that you can put into your life that will bring you more well-being. Okay. A person practices gratitude, a person does this or whatever it may be. And what he says is that according to research, the fastest, kind of the most effective, bang for your buck positive intervention, if you're in a low place and you want to get to a better place, the fastest thing you can do, the most effective thing you can do is you begin to give to someone, and you'll see that will change your well-being the most in the least amount of time.
I believe that's true.
Right?
Oh, yeah. And that's worked in my life that way. The moment I become focused on what my needs are that aren't being met, rather than look at the greater whole, there's the law of reciprocity. If I will get outside myself and serve, unbelievable things will happen. In fact, I did a podcast several months ago on gratitude, and I came down with these 3 things. I said, and you can't really probably stack it this way, but this is what I did for the podcast. I said, giving and gratitude is important, and there's 3 levels of gratitude. The first one is to be thankful for something, right? That's good, to make a list and be thankful for something. The next one that's deeper, is to have appreciation for something. But then I said in the podcast, the highest level of gratitude is contribution. That when you are really grateful, you have an abundance mindset, it's your desire to share. It's your desire. Stephen Covey would always say, there's enough pie for everybody. And he would talk about the scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. And I just believe the more people can see that they're not under threat, that everybody wants to be loved, and you have to look and see, how can I serve that person in a different way? To first, starting paradigm. Todd, you said this, you used the term paradigm in the beginning of this, is you got to shift your paradigm from looking at what that person can do for me, or how that person isn't serving me the way I want to be served, and instead say, wait a minute, maybe that's a blind spot in myself. What if I start serving that person the way that they want to be served? What you guys are saying is naturally, it's the human inclination for that person to want to turn and serve back.
Right.
And Peter, I love what you just said, that based on your research with Martin Seligman, is that's the fastest way to turn the feelings around.
You got it. 100%. 100%. And that should really be, just to add on to this, we're talking about the world of marriage.
Yes.
If people want to know, how do you define what a marriage is? In the ideal world, what a marriage is you have 2 people who are invested wholeheartedly in the well-being and the success of the other.
Totally.
You take 2 people and you make it their mission is going to, I am going to be there for my wife no matter, rain or shine. I am thinking about 24/7. How can she have the life that she wants? And she's doing vice versa. You have a magic there that no money can buy you.
You know what the tough thing is that I found is when she doesn't agree. When she doesn't agree with the strategy. right? And it's working through that. It's saying here's how, right? But through that, obviously, we know it helps us be successful. But I'm just keeping it real with a marriage. So it's one thing to say, okay, I'll serve you, but I don't agree with you.
Not easy.
It's not easy.
TJ, one of the things we did, the way the book is laid out, the whole first 40% of the book is kind of the big picture, philosophical, deep, mystical. Right. Here's what marriage is. Here's how love works. Here's male and female polarities and very, very fascinating things, which if you have a deeper appreciation, understanding, that can give you a very amazing kind of, as we said, a few paradigm shifts about what a relationship can be. But then we get very, very practical. The whole last 60% of the book is what we call the 4 paradigms of giving, or the 4 pillars of giving, excuse me. And these are strategies on how to make marriage work, how to make it fresh, how to develop respect. One of the things that we think is the most important chapter, maybe in the whole book, is a little chapter called "It All Depends on Me."
Yep.
And the concept there is really what you were just talking about and what Peter was just talking about, which is that you and I may not be the same. You and my spouse and I, whoever my spouse is, we may not be the same. We may not think the same. And by the way, we might have some really rough history behind us as well. But at a certain point, if I take the responsibility and say, one second, my marriage is about trying to give that person, that spouse, the life that they deserve. And, right now I'm angry at them and they're not doing all the things I think they should be doing for me and all these other things. But you know what? I'm going to, irrespective of what my spouse is doing right now, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to start the process of giving. We have seen this strategy with our students really kickstart a new beginning. Because the spouse may be for a little while a bit skeptical. What are you after? You're trying to manipulate me. At a certain point, if the other person sees, wow, my husband or my wife, my significant other is just, irrespective of what I'm doing, trying to give to me, trying to do for me, once again, it sparks some kind of a reaction. And we have seen marriages which were really on the rocks, that one person could save the marriage without waiting for the other person. And Peter has like this great kind of like methodology that he loves to use. But I think it's worth Peter just talking about his method over here. But it's worked great for a number of our couples.
Cool.
What I've seen here is like this. It's an interesting thing, is that if you look at individuals, we think we're quite complicated. The answers are usually quite simple. Actually, things may manifest in a complicated manner. But if you look at human beings, you look at our lives, let's look at the negative traits. What you usually see is that a person has a couple of core negative traits. And those kind of manifest in so many different ways. For example, let's say a guy has a real anger trait, an anger issue. That's going to come up. He's going to have work issues. He's going to have community issues. He's going to have issues in the basketball court. He's going to have issues with his friends, issues with his parents. That anger issue is going to find its way into every aspect of his life if he doesn't really take control of it. Well, if it's manifesting in all areas of his public life, you better believe it's coming into his private life, into his marriage, and probably in a much stronger way. And one of the things that we find is one of the most powerful ways of actually giving, and I call it more the indirect method, is imagine this, okay? You have this husband with this anger issue, and his wife, he's tried to work on the marriage and tried different things, and maybe it's not even going. And he says, listen, what I do know is that this anger issue, besides the fact it's impacting so many areas of my life, for sure it's impacting my wife in a very negative way. I'm going to forget the marriage right now. I'm not even going to think about the marriage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take responsibility for me working on my anger issue. And all of a sudden, you have this husband, and now there he is. He gets that therapist. He goes to TJ's seminars. He is listening to podcasts. He is, who knows? He's doing that. He is in work mode of I am going for it. So, I imagine it like, here's this guy getting into bed at night in his room, and on the side table, he's got, a bunch of books piled up, and he's listening to a podcast, and he's in it. He's got a folder from a seminar he went to. All of a sudden, what his wife is going to see is this, her husband making an effort. And probably what's going to happen is, besides the fact of her seeing a change in her marriage because the anger issue is better, she's going to say to herself, you know what? What do I bring to the table? Maybe I have a couple of issues I need to work on. And then, so it leads to this upward, this upward spiral. The wife begins to work on her thing. Now her bedside table is packed with those books and those seminar folders and you name it. And now what you have is two people, for the sake of giving to the marriage, working totally as their own kind of independent character, but it's impacting the marriage in an awesome way. So that's one of the things that we discuss in the book, kind of an indirect form of giving, of where a person can just focus on, what do I bring to the table? Let me work on that, and I guarantee you'll see massive change in the marriage.
Agreed. That makes me think of the word interdependence, is that we independently are working on ourselves for the purpose of serving the greater good or the greater whole. But together we make a stronger team. Besides gratitude and working on yourself, are there other ideas that you two put forth in this book that help us understand why so many marriages are not making it?
I'll tell you this. I think there's a huge paradigm that we discuss in the beginning of the book, which is crucial. The paradigm we discuss is that great marriages are built. They don't just happen.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we live in this world where we are under the assumption, and a lot of it has to do with our Hollywood experience, is that if we just find that right person, everything will just flow and it will be great. And there are a lot of people out there who are really disappointed because everything has a point of inspiration. Everything has a world of newness, which is beautiful and fantastic. Relationships, technology, your new job, everything. But at some point, that wears off and other things look more enticing. And unfortunately, what happens is at that point, people make the huge mistake and they say, well, you see, it wasn't meant to be, because if it was meant to be, the magic would still be flowing. The energy would still be there. And that is a huge mistake that people make, because the reality is, at that point right there is where the marriage begins. And if a person has the mindset, you know what, I'm going to build something amazing, now let's work on it and go for it, all of a sudden what you're going to see is that now we can actually get to that dream marriage that we want. So one of the biggest things that we always kind of deal with is just getting that paradigm out of people's head that unfortunately they have it, and it ruins, relationships that could be great, but you got to work hard to get there.
So you're triggering a couple thoughts in my mind. On one hand, I'm thinking, what do you say for the person that's listening to this right now that says, hey, you three, listen, I've been with my spouse for a number of years. It's on the rocks. I within the next few weeks, we're probably going to get a divorce. It's just come to that place. And I've tried, but that person's not even willing to try. Right. So that's one conundrum, right? Because my thought would be, if I had to respond to it, my thought would be, I don't know all the answers to everybody's ins and outs. We don't know what the other marriage partner is in that relationship, where they are in terms of maybe their background, their addictions, their habits, whatever, depending on their upbringing. We don't know a lot of things. So this is all said in a kind of hypothetical type place. But I would think there's usually a delay that you've got to give, truly serve. That I mean serve, it seems to me in my marriage that I have to be willing to serve in the way that many times the way that she wants to receive it. If she wants this thing done, and I have my way of doing it, but she has mentioned to me she'd like me to do it this way, but it shouldn't matter, honey, I got the job done. Well, sometimes it does matter, the way that it's being done, for whatever the reason is. serving them the way that they desire to be served. And my thought is, yes, there's going to be a delay when you start doing this in terms of before she realizes or he realizes that this effort is being put forth. But I think in time it will come.
One thing is for sure, if a marriage is on the rocks, and if it, and by the way, as you know, things tend in a world of entropy, things don't stay stable. Even if things get a little bit worse, they don't stay there. They tend to get worse and worse and worse. Entropy just says that without a lot of energy coming into the system will fall apart. And that's the way it works in the physical world, and that's the way it works in a relationship in the same way. So for sure, by doing nothing, it will fall apart. Now, there happens to be an incredible piece of research I once saw. It's now, and it's a little bit touchy-feely, but I think you'll see how insightful it is. In the world of marriages, about 10% of marriages are what you would call made in heaven, meaning they come together, they just work together, they meld together, they both have great character, they're both, and it just takes off. About another 10% of marriages are absolutely, no matter what you do, they are made, not in heaven, but quite the opposite. And no matter what you do, no matter how much therapy, no matter how many books you read, no matter how many podcasts and seminars and everything else, they are doomed.
Okay.
But what that means is that 80% of marriages are neither made in heaven nor made in hell, which is to say, it's just going to be a question of what you do with them. How much do you work on them? How much do you put into them? So when you ask the question, like, what do you say to this guy, this woman, this whatever their couple is, that they're a few years in and things aren't good? Well, again, if they're in that bottom 10% and there's nothing to do, then there's nothing to do. Then they will wind up divorced.
And I will say, you don't know if you're in the bottom 10 until you're willing to pay a price to try to make it work.
That's right.
Because I don't want someone to hear this and go, we're in the lower 10. Exam.
No, for sure. They probably know they're not in the top 10 because they wouldn't be feeling the way they feel. But it's much more likely that they're in the 80% than in that bottom 10. And the only way to know is to start working. And we have found that we put in these so-called pillars of giving. We found that these are things that if a husband and wife go out, first of all, they got to go out. You have to have a date night. I mean, again, we're in quarantine now, so it may not work at the moment exactly that way. But even in quarantine, by the way, a date night can work in its own way. But that's okay.
Be creative. Yes.
Be creative.
Yeah.
But husbands and wives, people in relationships need to have a time and space with each other, not about logistics, about remembering why we are together and why we care about each other. And we have found couples that take this book and they basically say, okay, we're going to pick one of these 4 pillars of giving. And we're going to look at it together. We're going to read it together. And over the next week, we're going to work on it. Mm-hmm. And it may be, for example, we have a whole section called Keep It Fresh. These are ways to bring freshness back into your marriage, because many marriages get stale, and they get stale quickly. People are so stressed out between work and children and financial obligations, everything else.
It's true.
People
Stresses.
are stressed.
Yes.
And it takes itself out on the marriage, and the marriage winds up becoming itself a source of stress, and it becomes at the worst, it becomes at the best, it's at least stale. And we found that there are a lot of little things you can do. For example, throw out one little example here. We actually saw some amazing research that says in the world of vacations, it turns out that the happiest time a couple has in a vacation is in the planning stage. Because you know why? Because when you're planning, you didn't miss your flight. The meal wasn't cold. The hotel room wasn't crummy. The service wasn't bad. The drinks weren't too expensive. Your wallet hadn't been stolen. The planning stage is perfect. And there's actually incredible research that shows that because the peak happiness of a vacation is in the planning, you should always be planning a vacation. Number one. Number two, the big Hail Mary vacation of we're gonna go to Hawaii for 3 weeks. Usually is going to be a disaster. It's going to set you back too much money. You'll never find babysitting. You'll never be able to get your work is going to be. But what we found is that 3-day vacations or 2-day vacations, or in some sense, even a half-day vacation, where the two of us steal away together. We take off the afternoon. We meet in the city. If we live near a city or we work in the city, we take off the afternoon. We get a hotel room. We have a meal together. We hang out together. It's exciting, it's new, it's fresh. then we go back home to our lives, and then we start the planning process again for the next vacation. We can always be in the mode of either having a little vacation or planning for the next vacation. And that sort of thing is like a shared activity which creates newness and freshness and anticipation and brings intimacy back into the picture in an exciting way. It didn't cost anything. It just required a little focus and a little bit of working together, and that date night on a Tuesday night where we pull it out and we say, this is what we're working on now. And that can sustain it. That can change the direction of a marriage. And you just got to change the direction.
Agreed. And I think little things you can begin now to bring juice back into that relationship. And
absolutely.
Dating is something we've done all these years where we separate from the kids. Like we're the type of parents that if we want to go on a cruise or something, I'm just saying, we want to take our kids with us. We like being with our kids. So we've taken them on many trips when you would think, why didn't you two just go together? So what we have found is a couple things. Number one, several times a month, we go on a date. We go out to eat. We go to a show. We do something where it's just us. A simple thing, a one evening thing. During this quarantine, I get you. You know what we've done? We've started around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We go on a walk about 2.5 miles up and a mile back, or whatever the thing is. And it's just a time to chat. Now, here's another specific that we have figured out in our relationship. During dates or during our walks, we don't talk about business. Now, I'm a big entrepreneur, and so I always want to talk about business. But I've learned to meet her needs, we need to talk about life. We need to talk about the kids. We need to talk about the future. We need to talk about the next thing, right? We need to talk about these things, not just my business that's busy and busy and busy. So I think there are little things you can do in small doses that can bring intimacy back into the marriage.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
100%. I think also that this is important, TJ, for all those people that, feel like things are falling apart a little bit. One of the things that we have people always ask us, how would you label yourself? And we really find that we're in the world of marriage education.
Yes.
And if you think about it like this, is that if you look at people's professional lives, you think about a guy wants to be a lawyer. He goes, his undergraduate years, he's a poli-sci major, and then years of law school and all those internships. I mean, the amount of training that we put in to get ready for our careers, it's unbelievable. Okay? Then once you're in your career, you're advancing yourself, you're taking extra courses, you are going to new seminars, you're getting reviewed. So here it comes all of a sudden, the most important thing. You ask someone, what are you living for? What are you working for? They want to have that great marriage. They're doing everything to build their family. So all of a sudden, the most important thing in your life, well, how much did you do to prepare for that? Meaning, did you study? Did you look into how a marriage is built? Did you figure out great modes of communication? And then once you're in it, did you stop educating yourself or did you continue? And what I would tell people out there is that what can be one of the most powerful things is when people kind of say, you know what, maybe there's a lot of good intentions here, but we don't necessarily know the ABCs of actually how to make a great marriage. Let's invest some time and energy into getting down these skills, to getting down the paradigms, and maybe that will change things drastically.
I love that. By the way, you brought up stress earlier. Let's be real. Stress is a real thing, and everybody responds to stress differently. And what I have found as I've coached marriages and I've also coached individuals is they usually act differently in moments of stress. And if both partners in that marriage recognize the reaction that they may receive by someone else, realize that maybe that person is under stress rather than it being an attack on them. Right. Just to separate it. Right. So when I see someone act out and I'm going, wow, holy cow, I always think, first of all, that doesn't have to define my happiness. And number two is, I don't know the state that person is in at this time. And this could happen outside. This is relationship 101. So stress, I just want to say, people act differently under stress. My point in saying that is, give them the benefit of the doubt. See it as a hiccup, not the totality. Shrink the bad, which leads me to another thought that I've been thinking about through this whole thing. It totally comes down to personal responsibility. So as we're winding down, the pillars are these: keep it fresh, gratitude, feel it, but also show it, respect in all of its forms, absolutely respect. You want more respect? Give respect. Right? You want more trust in it? You want more trust in the relationship? Then be trustworthy. Right? So it's law of reciprocity. And then the last one is responsibility. It depends on me. When I read that and I think about that, I think about, in the end, you've got to take responsibility for your marriage. You've got to take responsibility for your life. If you're unhappy, you have got to take responsibility for yourself. Why are you not happy? What story are you telling yourself? That thing you keep saying about your spouse, is it really true? Okay, question. Is it always true? No, it's just true some of the time. And really break things down and see the blind spots. And then, like you said, Peter, being willing to keep the growth happening. You're right. In the world of business or corporate America or whatever else, we're always going to conferences and so forth, always becoming more effective. Here's one thing I will say boldly, that as I work with executives, I had just last week, one new coaching executive that I'm working with is like, 10 years ago, I did a lot of personal discovery and I worked on the personal side. I don't really need to work on the personal aspect to be a better leader. Don't unleash me right now. Don't unleash me. I have never found just teaching, for example, leadership principles or work-related principles. Let's just keep it general. Work-related skills and traits. To just focus on those without working on the individual side is not sustaining. It won't work.
Right.
And so understand, by listening to this and getting the book, it's not a partnership, I believe, in large part. It's about taking responsibility for yourself, but taking responsibility to owning your situation and then going from there.
That's true. That's right. Beautiful.
100%. 100%.
You guys, listen. Okay, what else do we need to talk about? What other exciting thoughts have we not talked about yet that you have on your chest or on your minds that you'd like to share? Anything?
I just like to share one more idea, and that is, again, another one of those ideas that comes out of the mystical works.
Yes.
And that is that we have, generally speaking, a pretty unsophisticated or shallow view of what makes us love. If you ask a person what causes love, so usually you'll be met with sort of a blank stare because it's a little bit hard to put your finger on. So then we like to follow that question up with, let me ask you the following question. Okay. Do you suppose you love someone who gives to you, or do you suppose you love someone that you give to? The knee-jerk tends to be, if a person gives to me, I love them, because as my love will grow for them. The more they give to me, the more appreciation I'll have, the more I'll feel for them. So we pose the following questions. Who loves who more? A child loves the parent more, or does a parent love the child more? Okay, and the answer is, one second, generally speaking, the parent loves the child way more than the child loves the parent. Well, how could that be? The parent does all the giving, the child does all the taking. You would think children would be madly in love with their parents, and it's the exact opposite. Another question, why do I love the house that I built? Why do I love the plant that I took care of? Why do I love my dog? Why do I love my cat? And the answer is, across all of these things, I love where I invest. I love where I give. Now, maybe the deeper vision of that is that when I give, when I invest, I actually take myself and I put myself into something else. Could be that it's really based in a way, in a self-love, because in theory, a healthy person does have a love for themselves. But when I take of myself and I invest in you, and I put myself into you, or I put myself into that plant, or I put myself into that dog, or I put myself into that project, there's a love that I develop for that thing where I invest. And that is much, much deeper than the love that I get because you keep giving and giving and giving and giving to me. Number one, it's deeper. And number two, I can control where I love. I think I need my spouse to give to me, and then I'll love her. It's not true. Start giving to your spouse and you will love her. And then all these other things will kick into place and all these other virtuous cycles at the same time. So that paradigm, which, I mean, a person can go their whole life and never clearly understand that paradigm. And what a tragedy. And so, you know, what a tragedy. And I realized, wow, you flip that around, you flip that paradigm into where it's truthful. I can cause myself to love my spouse, even though they're not perfect, and even though they're not quite as cute as they were when I married them, and they're not quite as funny as I thought they might be, and you know, and neither am I, by the way. But the point is, the point. Let's be serious. But the point is, I can cause myself to love the other person if I get myself to start giving, and that's a game changer when a person just understands that and puts that into place. So I would leave you with that thought.
I love it. Before I go to you, Peter, because I know you got probably something to say too. It makes me think, when you were talking, it made me think of years ago, I read something, one of the books by Dr. Phil. And he shared the story of a spouse who called her partner 18 or 20 times a day to basically say, do you love me? Do you love me? While you're at work, are you thinking of me? Are you thinking of me?
Well,
I know. If your need is for that person to give you love, one suggestion I would have is you've got to learn to have self-acceptance. Someone else can't make you feel happier about yourself. Someone else can't make you feel more loved. As you love others, they will love in return. But in the end, you've got to love yourself first. You know, I wrote the book, The Secret of the Slight Edge, with a man named Bob Mowad. He was on his deathbed the last 2 months of his life. He was laying. He had been in a coma for 3 weeks. They pulled, let's keep it simple, they pulled the respirator out because the family said that it was time to let him go. It was in his will that way. And then all of a sudden, he started to breathe on his own. And he came home and he called me up and said, let's finish this book that we began working on. I mean, that story is on YouTube. But I remember I ended up going to his house. He's laying on the bed and we began writing these principles. His mind was as sharp as a whistle, but his body was just slowly falling apart. He never saw the physical form of that book, which will be coming out here pretty soon, the digital version of it, which we've never put out before. It comes out in the next couple of weeks. But anyway, my point that he says the one great commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. And then he would always say, that's the problem with the world. That's what they do. Because they don't love themselves, it's difficult to love someone else. So my suggestion is to believe, anyone listening to this right now, that you are special and unique with all your strengths and your weaknesses. And when you have a strength, that makes you wonderful. But when you have weaknesses, that doesn't make you bad. And you don't need to feel that you're unworthy. You don't need to beat yourself up. The moment you can accept the totality of who you are, take ownership for it, and trust that you're still good, that you're still special, that you still have individual worth. Think about, and this is just TJ talking, but think about how much more you could give to that relationship instead of asking for more, for someone else to fill that hole. You've got to learn to accept yourself, and from there you're able to give more. Okay, I said a lot there. Any thoughts?
Yep.
Amazing. Listen, I couldn't agree more with you. And I've seen a lot of situations actually with marriages that we work with, that when you see someone with a self-esteem issue, And, they can so easily blame it on the marriage or blame it on the situation. And a lot of times what I found is, whoa, let's separate you from the marriage right now. Let's just do some individual self-esteem work. And what you see is you get that person worked out as far as their self-esteem is concerned. Then you put them back into the marriage. Now the marriage has a chance. And so I agree with you. I think that, it's unfortunately, it's unfortunately one of the battles that I think that we're fighting all over the world today. I think self-esteem issues are, unfortunately, they're everywhere, from highly successful people to young kids. And it's a huge problem. And you see, like you're saying, that when a person has a self-esteem issue, but they don't feel a certain way about themselves, they're like a ship with a hole in the back of it. And no matter how much wind there is, and no matter how much, how fast the engine's going, that hole is letting in water, and therefore that boat is only sinking. And I've seen, just to agree with you, I've just seen what you're saying to be so true. And if there's any place where it really impacts, especially in our marriages, the reason why, especially in our marriages, because a lot of times we can put on a certain facade in our public experiences. I can act a certain way. I leave the house. I want to, hold myself a certain way. I need to have people to impress. But especially when we go back home, we usually kind of let go a little bit. That's when those self-esteem issues actually come way more alive. So if there's a place where your self-esteem issues actually impact someone the most, it's your spouse.
I'm going to say something bold right now. I've never said it before. The self-help industry, which I've been an author in for 20 years, $1 billion industry. And some of the most unhappy people are the ones reading all the self-help books. Do I think that self-help books have goodness in them? Yes, I do. But happiness isn't out there. And I agree with you, Peter, and Todd, of course, that one great place to learn to love yourself is to openly work with strengths and weaknesses within your marriage to become that better person, to build the other person. In return, that other person will build you. What did you say at the beginning, Todd? That I forgot.
The more you put on your shoulders, the bigger you become.
The bigger you become. And I think if you're open and real, like you were just saying, Peter, in a relationship, that you'll work on those things together, not expecting either person to be perfect, then the whole wins. And I think that's a beautiful concept. If you're always looking out there, seeking to, at some point you have to say, I am worthy and good. I have greatness within, if you will. And I will take that into relationship, and I will believe that they also have greatness within. They're worthy, they're good, their desires are good. I know. And as we do that, hey, we'll live happier lives if we'll get outside of ourselves and serve the other, for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, I know we went long.
TJ, keep up the great work. Really, really keep up the great work. It's what you're doing to try and to help people really believe in themselves and to push themselves to really kind of take ownership of their lives and see that they are special. Like you just said, if that's not there, everything falls apart. And if that is there, a person has resilience, a person can handle the stresses in life, a person has the ability to celebrate other people. It's like it's the meat and potatoes of being a human being.
Right. All right, Todd.
It was great. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for both being on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Pleasure.
Amazing.
Pleasure. All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
You betcha.
Podcast listeners, thanks for listening. You've taken time out of your schedule, and I really appreciate it. Now do me a favor. If you like what you heard, star it. Thanks. Now go unleash your greatness within.
GreatnessWithin.com